I'm Tall Brook, and I'm the author of a number of books like One World and Avatar of Night. And my background is that I spent some years in India under a guru who just died the other day. His name is Sai Baba, and he was, at least appeared when I was under him, like a miracle worker. So my background is that my parents were diplomats. I grew up here, but mostly overseas. England for 10 years. Europe, the Middle East, 4 years in Beirut, Lebanon, really all around, and 3 years in India, so sort of all over the world. And the whole India thing came out of, well, I grew up in an atheistic family, and there was absolutely no sense of meaning in my family in terms of where one fits in the universe. I was kind of on my own to find out the meaning of life, why we're here. And that started at a really early age. And I got into some very weird stuff. When I was like 10, our maid in London had told me about a Ouija board where you can talk to the dead. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And so I said to my dad on the way to work, do me a favor, bring me back a Ouija board. And he was, of course, a very sophisticated agnostic, atheist, humanist, naturalist, didn't believe in the supernatural, and brought that thing back to our house in London, and I started playing around with it and noticed presences in my room. Look, that's interesting. So that was a psychic doorway that opened up, and by the time I was 11 and got ill in the London house, I started having pretty much journeys out of the body, astral projection, of ripping out of my body and then going way up into the sky and looking down at myself in the room. So whatever was going on, that was another occult doorway. So by the time we went back to the States and I was 12, there's a book there about reincarnation in a drugstore, and I thought, very interesting. So the fact that my spirit apparently left my body is probably evidence that at death we do that, we reincarnate. So to really draw this thing out, by the time I was at the University of Virginia, I'd had a full-bore mystical experience under some very powerful Sandoz LSD-25 from Switzerland, from the labs in Switzerland, the Sandoz labs, and it just blew my head off. For the first time I left. By then I was an atheist again, and it was an agonizing kind of worldview. So I took this acid and it ripped me across the universe. And I describe it in my book, dealing with all this stuff, Avatar of Night. I probably have a copy right here. It's in this book, a 400-pager. It's on Amazon. It's now recently a Kindle ebook. And it goes into the whole kind of spiritual doorways in my time under Sai Baba. So I had that mystical experience and immediately read the really heavy Indian writings, sort of making sense of what I had, what I've gone through. The Upanishads, the different books in Vedanta, the writings of Sri Aurobindo, and some Maharishi. Ramakrishna was the main one. Thousands of pages of this stuff, and suddenly I was putting together a system of reality that seemed to trump everything in the West. The dead church on the corner, the mindless Christian ghetto, from my viewpoint. This was high-powered stuff, where as you become aware of your higher self or become enlightened, you grow into sort of godhood. Very seductive stuff. So I ended up in London getting a ticket to India. Took a charter flight that I never planned to come back on. I planned to go over there and die over there. And went to India and started crossing India. Went to Rishikesh and met Maharishi, was initiated in his house. Met some of the gurus over there. And then in Delhi, this very pretty Indian girl said, look, hey, your latest Newsweek is all you need to look at to find out who the real God man is. His name is Sai Baba. He's in South India. He works miracles. He didn't turn water into wine. He turned it into gasoline when his car ran out. Well, that's interesting. According to the Newsweek article, and they had pictures of him, thousands of people saw him turn water into gasoline. And so it's kind of a modern equivalent of water into wine. That's very interesting. And it really puts to shame the kind of naive naturalism of our time. The science, it's as flat as a tabletop. No supernatural, no meaning. Very interesting. So I ended up taking a train to Bombay, and then I went to Madras. And this is really weird. I get off the train thinking, how the heck am I going to find this guy? I go outside, and the Mercedes-Benz is out there, a Mercedes, and I just said to the guy, you don't happen to know where Sai Baba is? And he was, on his keychain was a picture of Sai Baba. I sat in his Mercedes, and he said, well, I happen to be the head of the Sathya Shiva Dal. It's a group in India of followers, thousands of them. And he was the president. And I thought, what kind of synchronicity when you get off a train in Madras and you get in a Mercedes and this guy's a picture of Bob on his keychain in the car ignition, and he says, I happen to be the president of the Sai Baba Sathya Shiva Dal. And I thought, unbelievable. He gave me directions. So I took another train to Bangalore, and it was right out of the Ramayana. I ended up on a bullock cart in Bukkapatnam and ended up meeting him, seeing this guy in a radiant red robe who had this energy. It took me quite a while to write about it. When I went back to UVA in Charlottesville, I wrote the whole account, which is now available. And he just seemed non-human. He seemed to fit the criterion of enlightenment that they talk about, in that he had this mindless, all-knowing sense. He didn't feel human. He felt off the chart. And immediately received me like an old friend, like an apostle come. He said, I've been waiting for you. Very soon he gave me a private interview. And suddenly he waved his hand, and what he was known for, he did. He materialized, from my viewpoint then, a handful of ash, and he said, eat it. And he later materialized other stuff for me, and I write about it in the book, of course, a big piece of rock sugar, and I eat that, and hugs me, and he says, again, I gave you that experience that you had. I'm aware of your pretty much dysfunctional family that you came from, and you're looking for truth from the time you're a small boy. I know about all that. And he did sort of divulge privy stuff that he couldn't have known, as far as I was sure, except for supernatural means. In the nutshell, and let's remember, he died Easter Sunday, April 24th, in India. He was 85 or 86. And he's got followings in the millions, including presidents of India, prime ministers, which was true when I was there. And what happened is that I'm kind of perceiving him on a lot of levels. At this point, I've moved into the ashram. I've skipped the charter flight back to America. This really feels like the future, and in many ways I feel like Peter meeting Christ, or Paul meeting Christ, or some of the young disciples. That this is an historical moment, this is a rare personage, and everything on the outside looked right. It looked okay. He had a big compound, he'd traveled, he was an itinerant miracle worker, somewhat like Christ, and took me into his inner circle very quickly. And I spoke at big festivals, I sang for him at Darshan, I was pretty much, at least for a 10-month period, the top Westerner, the leader of the rest of the community.